Good afternoon. Welcome to the weekly livestock market update. I'm your host, Meghan Grebner, with us as always to talk all things markets. University of Missouri, Scott Brown. Good afternoon, Scott.
Good afternoon, Megan.
All right, we're going to talk some farm income today. We'll talk a little monthly trade data and check out the latest supply and demand numbers from the USDA. But to recap, or to kick things off, let's recap what happened. Another fairly solid week, especially in the cattle markets.
That's right, Megan. We got higher cattle prices this week. When we start with live fed cattle, they were about $1.10 higher this week. Those feeder cattle markets were also stronger this week. I'm going to call them $1 to $4 higher on the week. On the future side, April live cattle futures were up $2.60 on the week, and the March feeder cattle contract was up $1.85. You look at the corn side, March corn futures actually down 12 and a quarter this week. I think that helped feeder cattle futures especially this week. Choice box beef prices down $1.30. On the hog side, we did see lower cash barrel and gilt prices. They're down 75 cents. The April lean hog futures contract was down 255. We also lost $2.40 on the pork cutout value. That was primarily bellies that gave us lower pork cutout value this week.
Definitely has been interesting watching what's happening on the cattle side of things. I would assume strong demand, but also short supplies is coming into that whole conversation about and watching where cattle prices are headed.
Yeah, for sure. I think demand's been fine. I do think we continue to find things that remind us that supplies are short and are going to get shorter as we go forward. That's really been at play in some of these higher prices we've seen.
All right, let's take a look at weekly slaughter numbers as we take a look compared to where things were last week.
Yes, we slowed down slaughter. USDA tells us for the week ending February 10th, cattle slaughter 622,000 head for the week. That would be 15,000 less than where we were a week ago and 6,000 less than what we did a year ago. And on the hog side, a run of 2.622 million head of hogs. That's 70,000 less than we did last week, but 147,000 head more than we did a year ago.
And we're still not necessarily taking a look at those year-over-year numbers, and we'll get to those as we get a little bit further into 2024. If you're wondering where those figures and comparison numbers are. USDA updated farm income for 2024, and probably one of the most shocking figures I think that might have come out this week.
Yeah, for sure. So USDA is now telling us 2024 farm income, they estimate to be down about 25% from where it was last year. That's, when you realize, Megan, we were plus $180 billion in 2022, and they're now suggesting 2024 at 116. That up that we got from 2020 through 2022, we're almost giving all that back if we see this 2024 estimate come true by the time we get to the end of 2024.
When we take a look at that, they also had some adjustments to production expenses. How does that play into if we're talking about a lower farm income, but also thinking about profitability for producers?
Yeah, so they did suggest 2024 production expenses will rise another nearly $17 billion. Just to put this in perspective, we were in 2019, we had production expenses at about $348 billion. USDA's current estimate of $455 billion just tells you the $100 billion roughly of increase in production expenses we've seen over the last 5 years. Expenses continue to be higher. I know we've gotten some things that have moved lower relative to where we were, but it is important to say we still have higher costs despite revenues that have come down. Crop receipts probably really the big driver here, down nearly $17 billion in 24 relative to 23.
Got monthly trade data out this week, and we continue to tell a very similar story. Lower beef, or trending lower beef exports and pork exports that are definitely showing some positive signs as we get 2024 underway.
Yeah, that's true. You know, the December numbers we got out from USDA shows beef exports that were 6% lower than a year ago. Value wise, we've done much better, and I think that's part of the reason we've seen quantities down is that the prices being paid by our international customers are also much higher, as we're much shorter on cattle and beef than we were just a few years ago. On the pork side, it's the other side of this, if you will. We're about 15% higher in terms of pork products moving out of the United States in December relative to a year ago. Mexico certainly is important to this discussion. They were up 17.5% relative to a year ago levels for December. So there's a mixed bag, if you will, and it's not surprising that we're talking about beef exports that continue to weaken just given these prices.
Supply and demand numbers out this week as we take a look and dig deeper into those. Let's talk a little bit about the changes and the updates from USDA to the livestock categories.
Yeah, so USDA didn't do a lot on the production side in the February report relative to January. However, when you start looking at the trade side of the equation, I think that's where we're seeing some of the bigger changes this month. USDA's net exports of beef, so exports minus imports, they reduced by 355 million pounds from January to February. I think partly as imports are stronger, and again, what's expected drag on the export side made that change. Yet on the pork side, pork net exports up 230 million pounds. I think that just shows the strength we got out of the December trade data as well, carrying further into 2024. On the prices side, USDA did raise both fed steer as well as barrel and gilt prices, each by $2 a hundredweight, so some stronger prices. Nice for pork to see when we were talking about $58 in January. 60 still isn't any thing to get excited about, but I'm glad we're moving in the up direction. I guess the good news here is no real adjustment on the feed cost side. Both corn prices and soybean meal prices, they left unchanged for this month, which is certainly lower than where we were just a couple of years ago.
So I'm going to talk specifically looking at pork exports and as we talk about monthly trade data, how critical that is going to be that the strength there remains to help at a time when pork prices have been trending lower.
Yes. So I think it is, Meghan, pretty important. And the thing that I think as we continue to look, it's some new countries that continue to be in this conversation of the growth in pork trade. Mexico's one that jumps up at us right away, but places like Malaysia, Dominican Republic, we can talk about Colombia being another good growth area. I think it's important just to highlight the diversification that we're seeing in terms of those pork exports, which we didn't have that increase in trade data. We might be talking about a more pessimistic outlook for hog prices. So it is good news on that trade front.
And it'll definitely be interesting to watch where pork is going in future months if we see China start to pick up some more pork as well, and as long as Mexico remains strong in its demand.
Yeah, that's right. I think China's still the one. How much more will they take in 2024? I don't think we know the answer to that question, but I see the opportunity for some additional product to be headed to China as well this year. And that could be what pork markets need to get another leg up as we move further into 2024.
Scott, that really does it for us this week. As we take a look to next week, we're going to talk more on the demand side of things, this time domestically.
Yeah, that's right, Meghan. We get retail prices out next week, as well as also a consumer sentiment report.
We definitely will keep those in mind and see how the domestic demand situation is playing out. Always great to see you.
You as well, Meghan.
We'll talk to you next Friday, Scott. To have a weekly livestock market update delivered to your email box every Saturday morning, go to brownfieldagnews.com. You can also submit questions and comments. And for a rundown of what happens every day in the commodity markets, make sure to check out John Perkins' Market Minute. Have a great weekend. I'm Meghan Grebner for Brownfield.